The slave market smelled like fear and chemicals. Amy sat on the cold metal platform with 17 other beings, most of them crying or making sounds she did not understand. Her knees were pulled up to her chest. She had stopped crying 3 days ago. Tears did nothing in this place. The creatures walking past looked at her with eyes that had too many colors or no colors at all. Some pointed at her with appendages that were not fingers. The translator chip behind her ear caught fragments of their speech. Deathworlder offspring. Rare specimen. Good price for human. She was 7 years old. 3 months ago she had parents and a baby brother. They were supposed to go to a farming planet where the sky was always orange and the crops grew tall. The pirates came while everyone was sleeping. Amy hid in a ventilation shaft and watched through the grates as they killed her father. Her mother died holding the baby. The pirates found her anyway. Now she sat on this platform in a station so big she could not see the walls. The auctioneer was tall and thin with shell-like skin that clicked when it moved. It spoke in a language that hurt her ears, but the translator made it into words she knew. Next item, human female, juvenile, healthy, Deathworld origin, starting bid at 5,000 credits. Hands and claws and tentacles rose in the crowd. Numbers climbed. Amy stared at the floor. She had learned not to look at the buyers. Looking made them angry or excited, and both were bad. The bidding slowed at 22,000 credits. The auctioneer was about to strike its hammer when the crowd went silent. Amy felt it before she saw it. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Every being in the market turned toward the entrance. Something massive moved through the doorway. It walked on 2 legs, but that was where similarity to humans ended. Scales covered its body in patterns of deep red and black. The head was long and sharp with eyes that glowed like hot metal. Claws clicked on the station floor. A tail swept behind it, easily as thick as Amy's whole body. The creature was taller than any being Amy had seen. It had to duck slightly under the doorway. Muscles moved under the scales with each step. This was something built to hunt and kill. Every instinct Amy had screamed that this was a predator. The crowd parted without being asked. Station security guards backed against the walls. Their weapons stayed in their holsters. Nobody wanted to be the first to challenge this thing. It walked straight toward the auction platform. Its eyes fixed on Amy. She could not look away. Those eyes were ancient and cold. They had seen things die, many things. The auctioneer's shell clicked rapidly, a nervous sound. Honored Sorok, the bidding is still open. Current price is. The creature reached into a pouch on its belt. It pulled out a small data chip and placed it on the auctioneer's table. The movement was careful and controlled. Amy realized it was holding back its strength. The human is mine. The voice was deep and rough like stones grinding together. It spoke the common language with an accent that made each word sound dangerous. The auctioneer picked up the chip with shaking appendages. Its eyes went wide as it read the contents. This is far more than the current bid. Honored one, you could purchase half the stock here for this amount. I want only the human. The auctioneer looked at the crowd. Nobody raised their hands. Nobody spoke. The deal was done. Sold to Wrathscale of the Sorok. The hammer came down. The creature called Wrathscale climbed onto the platform. Each step made the metal groan. Amy pressed herself against the back wall, but there was nowhere to go. He stopped in front of her. This close she could see scars cutting through his scales, old wounds that had healed badly. He had fought many times and survived. Stand, it was not a request. Amy's legs shook, but she stood. She came up to his mid-thigh. He could crush her without effort. He could eat her in 2 bites. She had seen nature videos about Earth reptiles. This thing was like those, but bigger and smarter and so much worse. He stared down at her for a long moment. Amy wondered if he was deciding how to kill her. Then he turned and walked toward the exit. After 3 steps, he stopped and looked back. Follow. Amy followed because there was nothing else to do. The other slaves on the platform watched her go with empty eyes. The crowd parted again as they walked through the market. Amy had to run every few steps to keep up with his long stride. They moved through corridors that all looked the same. Metal walls, bright lights, beings of every shape moving in all directions. None of them looked at Rathskel twice. They knew what he was. They knew to stay away. He led her to a docking bay where a ship waited. It was not new or pretty. The hull had burn marks and patches welded over holes. Weapons bristled from every angle. This was a ship built for fighting. The boarding ramp lowered as they approached. Rathskel walked up without looking back. Amy hesitated at the bottom. Once she got on that ship, she would leave the station. Leave any chance of finding other humans. Leave everything. But there was nothing behind her worth staying for. She climbed the ramp. The metal was warm under her bare feet. Inside, the ship was dark and smelled like oil and something sharp she could not name. The ramp closed behind her with a hiss. Locks engaged. Rathskel moved to the pilot seat and began pressing controls. Engines hummed to life. Amy stood in the doorway and gripped the frame to stay standing. He did not look at her, but his voice filled the small space. "There is a room in the back. Food in the storage unit. Do not touch the weapons." The ship lifted off. Through the viewport, Amy saw the station falling away. She was leaving, going somewhere with a creature that bought her like cargo. Her voice was small and rough from not using it. She had not spoken real words in weeks, but something made her say it anyway. "Thank you." Rathskel's clawed hand paused over the controls for just a moment. Then he continued his work as if she had not spoken. The ship turned and jumped into hyperspace. Stars stretched into lines. Amy watched them blur together and wondered if she would ever see home again. She did not know it yet, but home was no longer behind her. Home was sitting in the pilot's seat, covered in scars and scales, beginning to wonder why he had paid a fortune for one small human child. 3 weeks in hyperspace felt like 3 years. Amy learned the rhythm of the ship quickly because survival meant paying attention. Rathskel woke at the same time every cycle. He checked the navigation systems first, then weapons, then life support. He ate once per day, large portions of dried meat that smelled awful. He never asked if Amy was hungry. She found the food storage on the second day. Military ration packs in plain silver wrappers. The writing was in 3 languages she could not read, but the pictures showed what was inside. Amy took 1 pack and ate it in the small room Rathskel had pointed to. The food tasted like cardboard, but her stomach stopped hurting. The room was barely big enough for the narrow bunk attached to the wall. No windows, no decorations. A storage locker held blankets that smelled like weapon oil. Amy made a nest in the corner instead of using the bunk. Corners felt safer. You could see both walls and know nothing was behind you. She watched Rathskel when she thought he was not looking. He moved through the ship like water, smooth and certain. Every action had purpose. Nothing was wasted. When he worked on the engine console, his claws moved faster than seemed possible for something so big. He knew exactly which wire to touch and which panel to remove. On the 5th day, Amy came out of her room and found him replacing a burned relay. She stood in the doorway and watched. His tail swayed slightly as he concentrated. After a few minutes, he spoke without turning around. "If you are going to watch, make yourself useful. Toolbox, red handle." Amy found the box and dragged it closer. It was heavy. She had to use both hands. Rathskel held out his hand and she placed a calibrator in his palm. He had not said what tool he needed. She had just known from watching what came next. "Adequate," he said. It was not praise, but it was not anger either. Amy stayed and handed him tools for the next hour. He never said thank you. He also never told her to leave. The pattern repeated over the following days. Amy began to understand the ship through these quiet moments. She learned that the humming sound from the port side meant the stabilizer needed adjustment. She learned that Rathskel's scales made a particular scraping sound when he was annoyed. She learned to move through the narrow corridors without making noise. On the 10th day, she spoke her second sentence since boarding. "Where are we going?" Rathskill was cleaning his claws with a blade designed for much bigger tasks. He did not look up. "My world." "Does it have a name?" "Scorch." Amy waited for more explanation. None came. She tried a different question. "Why did you buy me?" This time he did look at her. His eyes were the color of molten copper. She could not read the expression in them. Human faces, she understood. This was something else entirely. "I was curious about Deathworlders. Your species has a reputation." "What kind of reputation?" "Difficult to kill." He went back to cleaning his claws. "I wanted to see if it was true." Amy's chest went tight. "Are you going to try to kill me?" "No, that would be wasteful. I paid too much for you to damage you now." He tilted his head slightly. "Unless you prove to be more trouble than value." It should have been terrifying, it probably was, but Amy found herself almost smiling. At least he was honest. The pirates had smiled while they hurt people. The slavers had used kind words while locking collars around necks. Rathskill just said what he meant. "I will try not to be trouble," Amy said. "See that you do." 2 days later, the ship shuddered as it dropped out of hyperspace. Amy grabbed the wall to keep from falling. Through the cockpit viewport, she saw a planet that looked angry. Red and orange surface with clouds that swirled in violent patterns. Active volcanoes dotted the landscape like glowing wounds. "This is Scorch?" she asked. "Yes." "It looks hot." "It is. The atmosphere will not kill you, but you will need supplements. The gravity is higher than your Earth. You will feel heavy until you adapt." The ship descended through atmosphere that shook them hard enough to rattle Amy's teeth. Rathskell's hands stayed steady on the controls. They dropped below the cloud layer and Amy saw his fortress for the first time. It was built into a dead volcano, all black stone and metal that had been fused together over what must have been centuries. Walls rose 50 meters high. Weapon emplacements tracked their approach but did not fire. Landing pads ringed the crater edge. Rathskill set the ship down with barely a bump. The engines powered down. He stood and moved toward the airlock. Amy followed, her legs shaking slightly. She was not sure if it was from the rough landing or from fear of what came next. The airlock opened and heat hit her like a physical thing. The air tasted like sulfur and ash. Amy stepped onto the landing pad and immediately felt wrong. Her body was too heavy. Each step took effort. The gravity pulled at her bones. Rathskill watched her struggle down the ramp. "You will adapt. Humans are good at that." "How do you know?" "I have studied your species. You survive in environments that would kill most galactic races. Your evolution made you flexible." He started walking toward the fortress entrance. "Come, I will show you where you will stay." Amy followed him across the courtyard. The ground was smooth volcanic glass that reflected the orange sky. Other structures surrounded them, all built in the same brutal style. Everything here was designed to withstand violence. Inside, the fortress was cooler. Rathskill led her through corridors carved from living rock. They passed rooms filled with weapons and equipment she did not recognize. Finally, he stopped at a small chamber. "This is yours. I modified the atmosphere controls. It will be easier to breathe. The temperature is lower than the rest of the fortress. There is a waste disposal unit and water dispenser." Amy looked into the room. It was 10 times bigger than the space on the ship. A real bed with actual padding. A window that showed the volcanic landscape outside. Storage units built into the walls. It was more than she expected. "Thank you," she said quietly. Rathskill made a sound deep in his chest, something between a rumble and a growl. "You say that often. Why?" Amy looked up at him. "Because you did not have to do any of this. You could have kept me in a cage. You could have hurt me, but you have not." He stared at her for a long moment. "I am not cruel, human child. I am simply what I am. He turned to leave, then paused. "What is your name? I should know what to call you." "Amy." "Amy?" He tested the word. "I am Rathskill, though you heard that at the auction." His tail swayed once. "Rest. Tomorrow you will begin learning how to survive on this world." He left her there. Amy sat on the bed and felt it compress under her weight. Through the window she watched volcanic vents release steam into the orange sky. She was on an alien world with a creature who could kill her without effort. She should be terrified. Instead, she felt something she had not felt in months. She felt safe. 6 months changed everything. Amy's body adapted to Scorch's gravity until moving felt natural instead of exhausting. Her muscles grew denser and stronger. She could run across the courtyard without getting winded. The heat that had made her dizzy at first became normal. She even started to enjoy the sulfur smell. Rathskill taught her without calling it teaching. He would work on repairs and she would assist. He would talk about the planet's predators and she would remember every detail. He would demonstrate a combat move once and expect her to copy it. She learned fast because failing meant disappointing him, and that had become unthinkable. She started calling him Wrath after the 3rd month. He had raised one eye ridge when she first said it but did not tell her to stop. Sometimes she caught him making a sound that might have been amusement when she talked to him. He was not warm or affectionate the way humans were, but he was steady. He was there. That was enough. The fortress became home. Amy knew every corridor and chamber. She knew which weapon locker held the cleaning supplies and which storage room had the best view of the lava fields. She knew when Wrath wanted silence and when he did not mind her questions. She knew the rumble he made in his chest meant he was content. Other Sorok visited occasionally. They brought supplies or news from other territories. They looked at Amy with curious eyes but never threatened her. Wrath made it clear she was under his protection. In Sorok culture, that meant something absolute. You did not touch another warrior's possession. You definitely did not touch their ward. Amy was helping Wrath inventory weapons when the message came through. His communication console lit up with an incoming signal. He activated it, and a voice spoke in the clicking language of the Sorok. Amy's translator had learned it by now. "Rathskill, this is Scalebrand. I have information you need." "Speaker." "The pirate consortium knows about your human. Their leader has put a bounty on her return." Amy's blood went cold. Wrath's expression did not change, but his tail went very still. That was a bad sign. "Which leader?" Wrath asked. "Noth, the raider who attacked the colony ship Ross Expedition." Amy's hands started shaking. She knew that name. The pirates had said it while they dragged children from hiding spots. Captain Noth, the one who had laughed while giving orders to kill everyone. "Why does he want her?" Wrath's voice was dangerously quiet. "Apparently losing her cost him reputation. Other pirates mock him for letting a Sorok take his prize. He wants her back to prove dominance. He is assembling a fleet." "How many ships?" 15 at last count. He will arrive in your system within 3 days. Wrath was silent for a moment. "Thank you for the warning, old friend." "Will you evacuate the child?" "No." "Then I will come help you defend her. My ship will arrive tomorrow." The transmission ended. Wrath stood motionless, staring at the blank screen. Amy felt her chest getting tight. 15 ships, an entire fleet coming for her, because she had survived, because Wrath had bought her. "I should leave," Amy said. Her voice came out small. "If I go somewhere else, they will not attack your fortress. You have been good to me. I do not want you to die because of me." Wrath turned to face her. His eyes burned. "You think I would give you to them? I think you should not have to fight a fleet because of one human." He moved fast, crossing the room in 2 strides. He knelt down so his eyes were level with hers. When he spoke, his voice was softer than she had ever heard it. "Listen carefully, Amy. I have lived 300 years. I have fought in wars that destroyed planets. I have seen empires rise and fall. In all that time I have been alone because that is what my kind does. We are solitary, we do not form bonds." He paused. "Until you." Amy's eyes were burning, but she did not let the tears fall. "You have given me something I did not know I wanted, a reason to care about tomorrow. I will not surrender that. I will not surrender you. Do you understand?" She nodded because she could not trust her voice. Wrath stood back up. "Now help me prepare defenses. If they want you, they will have to come through me. And I promise you, Amy, that will cost them everything." The next 2 days blurred together. Wrath activated defense systems that Amy had never seen used. Automated turrets rose from hidden compartments. Energy shields charged until the air hummed. He tested every weapon personally. Scalebrand arrived with his own ship and immediately began setting up secondary defenses. Amy learned to operate the fortress control systems. Wrath showed her how to manage shields, redirect power, and activate emergency protocols. She absorbed it all with desperate focus. If fighting was coming, she would not be helpless. On the morning of the third day, the sensors screamed a warning. 15 ships dropped out of hyperspace above Scorch. They were a mixed fleet, different species and designs, all united under one pirate captain. The lead ship was massive and ugly, covered in weapons and painted with symbols that meant death in a dozen languages. Wrath stood in the command center watching the fleet take up positions. Amy stood beside him. Her hands were steady now. Fear had burned away into something harder. The communication console activated without being asked. A face appeared on screen. The being was humanoid but with gray skin and eyes that had no whites. He smiled with too many teeth. "Wrathskill, I am Captain Noth. You have something that belongs to me." "I have nothing of yours, pirate." "The human child. I acquired her legally through conquest. You stole her from the market." "I paid for her. That makes her mine." Noth's smile grew wider. "Then I will take her from you and kill you in the process. Surrender her now and I will let you live. Refuse and I will turn your fortress into glass." Wrath's hand rested on Amy's shoulder. The touch was gentle despite his claws. "Come and try." "You are alone, Sorok. I have 15 ships and 300 warriors. You cannot win." "You are wrong about one thing," Wrath said quietly. "I am not alone." He cut the transmission. The command center went silent except for the hum of charging weapons. Outside the window, Amy could see the pirate ships moving into attack formation. In minutes, they would open fire. She looked up at Wrath. He was staring at the fleet with the same calm expression he wore when fixing broken equipment. No fear, no doubt, just absolute certainty about what came next. "Wrath. Yes. I am glad you bought me." His eyes softened just slightly. "So am I, child. So am I." He turned to the controls. "Now get to the command center safe room and seal the door. This will become violent." Amy started to move, then stopped. "Please be careful." "Always." His tail brushed against her arm, the closest thing to a hug he could manage. "Now go." She ran. The first explosion shook dust from the fortress ceiling. Amy stumbled but kept her balance as she ran toward the command center. Behind her, she heard Wrath roaring orders to Scalebrand. Heavy footsteps moved in different directions. The battle had started. Amy reached the command center and activated the door controls. The room was designed to be the fortress's brain during combat. Screens showed every approach, every sensor reading, every weapon system. Wrath had taught her how to read them all. She slid into the control seat and began activating systems he had prepared. Shield strength at maximum. Automated turrets online. Power distribution balanced. Outside the reinforced windows, she saw the first wave of raiders landing. Small ships that moved fast and carried troops. They spread out across the volcanic plains surrounding the fortress. Wrath's voice came through the communication system, calm despite the chaos. "Amy, status." "Shields are holding. I count 20 landing craft on the ground. More coming. Good, stay sealed in that room. Do not open the door for anyone except me or Scalebrand. Understood. She heard weapon fire through the walls. The automated defenses were engaging. On the screens, she watched Wrath and Scalebrand meet the first raiders in the outer courtyard. What she saw made her understand why other species feared the Sorok. They moved like natural disasters. Wrath's claws tore through armor as if it were paper. His tail swept 3 raiders off their feet in one motion. Scalebrand fought with similar brutal efficiency, all scales and teeth and unstoppable force. The raiders had numbers, but the Sorok had centuries of combat experience written into their very bones. Amy focused on her job. She managed the shield distribution, sending extra power to sections taking heavy fire. She activated defensive measures Wrath had installed, flooding certain corridors with superheated steam when raiders tried to breach the walls. She was frightened, but her hands did not shake. Wrath needed her to do this. That was enough. The battle raged for 3 hours. Bodies piled up in the courtyard. The raiders kept coming. Amy watched the numbers on her screen and felt sick. So many beings dying for one pirate's pride, for her. Then Scalebrand fell. Amy saw it happen on the screen. He was defending the main gate against a squad with heavy weapons. A plasma bolt caught him in the chest. He staggered but kept fighting. A second bolt took him in the side. He went down hard. Wrath saw it too. His roar of grief and rage shook the fortress. He abandoned his position and charged toward his fallen friend. Raiders scattered before him. Amy had never seen him move so fast. He reached Scalebrand and knelt beside him. The audio feed caught Scalebrand's last words. "Protect the hatchling, she matters more than us." Then he was gone. Wrath stayed there for 3 seconds, head bowed. When he stood back up, something had changed in him. The careful control was gone. What remained was pure predatory fury. He tore through the raiders like they were nothing. Amy watched him kill with an efficiency that was terrifying and beautiful. This was what he had been before she knew him. This was the warrior that entire sectors feared. But there were too many. Even Wrath could not be everywhere. Amy saw on her screens that a squad of 12 raiders had breached the lower levels. They were working their way up, heading toward the command center. They had explosives. Amy checked the seals on her door. They would hold for a few minutes, maybe. She opened a channel to Wrath. "Wrath, raiders are in the lower levels, Section 7. His response was immediate. "Stay sealed in, I am coming." But he was on the other side of the fortress dealing with another wave. Amy watched the raiders getting closer. She heard their boots in the corridor outside. Voices speaking in languages her translator converted to words she wished she did not understand. "The human is here somewhere. Find her. Noth wants her alive, remember that." "I remember, shame though. She would sell for more in pieces." They laughed. Amy's heart hammered against her ribs. She looked at the control panel. There were other systems she could activate, dangerous ones that Wrath had shown her only once. Desperate measures. The raiders reached her door. She heard them placing charges. 30 seconds until breach. She made her decision. Amy activated the environmental override for Section 7. The fortress had been built on a volcano for a reason. Geothermal vents ran through the lower levels. Normally they were sealed. She opened them. Superheated steam blasted into the corridor at temperatures that could melt metal. The raiders' screams were mercifully brief. Amy's hands shook as she closed the vents. She had just killed 3 beings. They would have killed her, but that did not make it feel better. More raiders were coming from a different direction. Amy led them through the fortress using the same tactics. She opened vents. She triggered gravity failures in corridors. She locked doors and vented atmosphere in empty sections. She used the fortress like a weapon because Wrath had taught her how. She killed 9 more raiders this way. Each time felt worse, but she did not stop. They were trying to get to her. She would defend herself. Then the last squad cornered her. 5 raiders with weapons and bad intentions. They reached the command center entrance, and this time Amy had no tricks left. The door would not hold. She had maybe 2 minutes. Her hand went to the communicator. She should call Wrath, tell him where she was, let him know what was happening, but he was still fighting outside. If he came for her now, he would leave his position. More raiders would get in. He might die. Amy looked at the raiders through the security feed. One of them was checking equipment. He looked up at the camera and smiled. Amy recognized his face. He had been there, on the colony ship. She had seen him through the ventilation grate. He had held her baby brother while someone else killed him. Something cold and hard settled in Amy's chest. She had run from these beings once. She had hidden and cried and been helpless. Not anymore. She activated her communicator, but she did not call for help. She only said one word. Wrath would understand. He would know what she meant. Wrath. Not a cry for rescue, not a plea for protection. A simple statement, his name, said with absolute trust. Outside, the raiders placed their final charge on the door. Inside, Amy stood up from the control seat and picked up the only weapon in the room, a small blade Wrath had given her for emergencies. It was meant for cutting wires, not fighting. She would make it work. Wrath heard his name and everything else stopped mattering. The raiders in front of him, the ships overhead, the fire and blood and chaos. None of it existed anymore. Only that one word spoken in Amy's voice. She was not screaming, she was not crying. She had simply said his name, but he heard everything underneath it. Trust, faith, the absolute certainty that he would come. He moved, raiders scattered or died, he did not care which. His path led through 3 corridors and 2 locked doors. The doors did not slow him, he ripped them from their frames. Metal shrieked and bent. Stone cracked under his claws. Somewhere behind him the battle continued. He was supposed to be defending the outer walls. Strategic position, tactical importance. None of that meant anything. Amy was in danger. That was the only fact that mattered. He crashed through the fortress like a living siege weapon. 4 more raiders tried to stop him. They died. He did not slow down. His mind was clear and cold and focused on one thing. Get to Amy. Everything else was secondary. The command center door was ahead. He could hear voices inside. Raiders, 5 of them based on the footsteps. They had placed charges on the door. Amateur work. The explosion would breach it but damage the room beyond. They did not care about preserving anything except the target. Wrath did not use the door. The wall beside it was thick stone, but it was still just stone. He hit it at full speed with his shoulder lowered. The impact would have killed most beings. The wall exploded inward in a shower of rock and dust. The raiders spun toward him. Weapons came up, too slow. Wrath was among them before they could fire. His claws found throats and chests. His tail swept legs. His jaws closed on a raider's arm and tore it away. The fight lasted 8 seconds. When it ended, 5 bodies lay on the floor. Wrath stood in the center of them, breathing hard. His scales were covered in blood and dust. New wounds leaked across old scars. He did not feel any of it. Amy stood pressed against the far wall, holding a maintenance knife in both hands. She was shaking, but the blade was steady. Her eyes were wide, and there was blood on her hands that was not hers. She had fought. That knowledge hit Wrath hard. "You killed them," he said. "Not these ones." Her voice was small but firm. "Others, in the lower levels. I used the fortress systems. I did not want to, but they were coming and you were busy and I could not just wait." Wrath crossed the room in 2 steps. He knelt down and pulled her against his chest. She dropped the knife and grabbed his scales with both hands. Her whole body was shaking now that the danger had passed. He could feel her heart hammering. "You did well," he rumbled. "You survived, that is what matters." "I was so scared." "Fear is intelligent, you used it correctly." He pulled back to look at her. "Do you know which raider that was? The one with the scar on his face?" Amy nodded. He was on my colony ship. He killed my baby brother. Wrath's eyes went hot with rage. Then I am glad I made his death painful. They heard weapon fire from outside. The battle was still happening. Wrath stood and lifted Amy onto his shoulder. Stay there. We are leaving this room. He carried her through the fortress corridors. Raiders saw them and fled. The few who tried to fight died quickly. Word was spreading through their ranks. The Sorok had entered a killing rage. Smart beings got out of his way. They reached the main courtyard. What Wrath saw there made him pause. The remaining raiders were retreating, running toward their ships, not fighting anymore. Something had changed. Then he looked up and understood. The sky was full of ships, not raider vessels, Sorok warships, 17 of them in formation above the fortress. Their weapons were hot and tracking every pirate vessel in the system. A communication signal forced its way onto every channel. A voice Wrath recognized spoke in the old language. This is Flamecrest of the Sorok. All warriors of our kind have heard what happens here. A hatchling was threatened. This cannot stand. Another voice joined. This is Ironfang. We stand with Wrathscale. More voices, more names. Warriors from across 3 systems. They had come. For Amy. For the principle she represented. In Sorok culture, you did not threaten the young under protection. You especially did not threaten them with entire fleets. Captain Noth's panicked voice cut across the channels. This is not your fight. The human is not even your species. Flamecrest's response was cold. She is under protection, that is enough. Surrender or die. The pirate fleet tried to run. It did not work. Sorok warships were built for hunting. They caught every vessel within 10 minutes. Most surrendered. 3 tried to fight. They became debris. Wrath watched it happen with Amy still on his shoulder. She pressed her face against his neck. He could feel wetness there, tears, but also relief. When the last pirate ship was captured, Flamecrest landed in the courtyard. He was older than Wrath by 2 centuries and scarred even worse. He approached slowly, respecting Wrath's current state. The hatchling is well, Flamecrest asked. She is well. Good. The old warrior looked at Amy. I have never seen one of our kind take responsibility for another being. You have started something strange, Wrathscale. I know. The others are curious. They will come to see her, to understand. Wrath's grip on Amy tightened slightly. They may come. They will not touch her. Flamecrest's eyes showed something that might have been amusement. No, I think they will not. He gestured to the other ships. We will hunt down the rest of Noth's fleet. Ensure this does not happen again. The pirate captain lives. We thought you might want him. I do. Then he is yours. Do with him as you wish. Flamecrest turned to leave, then paused. She has changed you, this small human. You fight differently now, with purpose instead of simple violence. Yes. Is it better? Wrath looked at Amy. She had stopped crying and was watching the conversation with exhausted eyes. Yes, he said quietly, it is better. The Sorok fleet departed. The fortress fell silent except for the sound of cooling weapons and dying fires. Wrath carried Amy through the destruction to a chamber that remained intact. He set her down carefully. Rest now, you are safe. Amy grabbed his hand before he could pull away. Where are you going? To deal with Noth. He must answer for what he did. Can I come? Wrath considered this. She was exhausted and traumatized. She should rest. But her eyes held something besides fear. They held need. The need to see this finished. If you wish. She nodded and stood on shaking legs. Together they walked to the detention cell where Noth waited. The pirate captain saw them coming and began to beg. His words were meaningless noise. Wrath looked down at Amy. What is your will? She stared at Noth for a long moment. The being who had destroyed her family, who had sold her, who had come back to hurt her again. She could ask Wrath to make it slow, to make it painful. She had that right. Instead she said simply, end it. Wrath complied. It was fast. When it was done, Amy did not look away. She needed to see, needed to know it was over. They walked back through the fortress together. The binary stars were setting. Tomorrow would bring repairs and questions and new challenges. But tonight Amy leaned against Wrath's side and felt something she had not felt since her parents died. She felt home. Months became years and years became a new life. Amy grew tall and strong in Scorch's heavy gravity. By her 12th birthday, she stood taller than most adult humans and moved with the fluid grace of someone who had trained with predators. Her muscles were dense from constant adaptation. She could run across the volcanic plains without breathing hard. The heat that had nearly killed her when she first arrived now felt comfortable. Wrath taught her everything he knew. Combat techniques developed over 3 centuries. Mechanical skills learned from maintaining war machines. Languages spoken across a dozen sectors. She absorbed it all with the same fierce focus that had kept her alive in the slave market. Learning was survival. Survival was honoring what Wrath had given her. Their relationship defied easy definition. He was not her father the way humans understood the term, but he filled that role and more. Teacher, protector, the steady presence that made her world make sense. She was not his daughter by blood or species, but she was his in every way that mattered. The fortress changed too. News spread of what Wrath had done for one human child, of how the Sorok had united for her. Strange things began arriving. First was a small reptilian being whose world had been destroyed by the same pirates. Wrath took the child in because it reminded him of Amy's arrival, scared, alone, needing safety. Then came others, a pair of insectoid orphans, a young mammalian whose colony had failed, beings of different species who had nowhere else to go. Wrath gave them shelter because Amy asked him to. She understood their fear. She knew what it meant to be lost. The fortress became something new, a refuge, a place where damaged children learned to be strong again. Amy helped care for them all. She knew their nightmares because she had lived them. She knew the long silence after trauma, the slow process of learning to trust. Wrath watched her work with them and felt something he had never expected. Pride. Not in conquest or victory, but in watching Amy become someone who protected others. She had taken her pain and turned it into purpose. That was more impressive than any battle. Galactic authorities eventually noticed. Human representatives came first. A diplomatic officer named Ruth arrived on a small transport. She was professional and kind and completely unprepared for what she found. "You are Amy of the colony ship Ross Expedition," Ruth said carefully. They sat in a chamber Wrath had designated for guests. "We have been searching for survivors. Your extended family on Earth has been notified." Amy listened politely. She was 16 now and had learned diplomatic courtesy from watching Wrath deal with various officials. "I appreciate you coming all this way. We can arrange transport to Earth. There are schools, programs for survivors. You could be with your own people again." "These are my people," Amy gestured to the fortress around them. "This is my home." Ruth looked at Wrath, who sat perfectly still on the other side of the chamber. His expression was unreadable, but his tail was wrapped protectively around the base of Amy's chair. "You are choosing to stay here freely?" Ruth asked. "No coercion or threats." Amy almost laughed. "Wrath would cut off his own arm before he threatened me. I stay because I want to, because this is where I belong." Ruth spent 3 days at the fortress. She interviewed Amy privately. She observed their daily routine. She saw how Amy interacted with Wrath and with the other young beings in the refuge. Her final report was simple. Amy was thriving in a way no standardized program could match. Forcing her to leave would cause harm, not healing. After that, representatives from other species came. They wanted to understand how a Sorok warrior and a human child had formed this bond, how it worked, what it meant for their species. Some came with genuine curiosity. Others came hoping to exploit the situation somehow. Wrath rejected most visitors. He had no interest in being studied, but Amy convinced him to accept some of them. They need to see that this is possible, she said, that different species can care for each other. So the fortress opened slightly, enough for others to learn, never enough to endanger the children inside. One day when Amy was 17, she stood on the fortress wall watching younger children train in the courtyard below. A small mammalian named Pip was struggling with balance exercises. Amy had struggled with the same ones once. She called down encouragement in the child's native language. Wrath approached and stood beside her. They could stand together in comfortable silence now. Years of shared experience meant words were often unnecessary. "You have done well with them," Wrath said eventually. "You taught me how. I taught you survival. You learned compassion somewhere else." Amy considered this. Maybe I always had it. Maybe I just needed to be safe enough to use it. They watched Pip finally complete the exercise. The child's triumphant squeak made them both smile. "Do you regret it?" Amy asked quietly. "Taking me from that auction, changing your whole life?" Wrath was silent for a long moment. He had lived 300 years alone, built a reputation as a warrior who needed nothing and no one. One human child had destroyed that carefully constructed isolation. "I regret many things in my long life," he said finally, "but you will never be one of them." Amy leaned against his side the way she had when she was small. She fit differently now, all grown tall and strong, but the gesture meant the same thing: trust, affection, home. "Good," she said, "because you are stuck with me." "I know." His tail wrapped around her shoulders. "I would not have it any other way." Years later, when Amy was 25, she stood in the same spot with her own ward, a traumatized human boy she had rescued from slavers. He was small and scared, and reminded her powerfully of herself at 7. "Is he really safe here?" the boy whispered, staring at Wrath with wide eyes. Amy knelt down to the child's level. She remembered Ruth kneeling the same way once, trying to convince her to leave. Now she understood both sides of that conversation. "See that dragon?" she said gently. "He is the best father in the galaxy, and this fortress is the safest place in any system." The boy looked uncertain. "How do you know?" "Because I was just like you, scared and alone, and he saved me. Now I am going to help save you." Wrath watched this exchange from across the courtyard. Amy had become exactly who she was meant to be: warrior and protector, teacher and guardian. She bridged species and cultures with the same ease she bridged the distance between fear and trust. She had whispered his name once in desperation. He had answered with absolute fury, but what came after was something neither of them expected. Not just survival, not just safety, but family in all the ways that mattered. The binary stars set over Scorch. Inside the fortress, children of a dozen species found shelter. Outside, the galaxy continued its chaos. But here, in this place built on volcanic stone and forged in battle, there was something rare and precious. There was home. And for beings who had lost everything, that was worth more than all the stars in the sky.